The world tells Israel, wait, there's still time. And I say, wait for what? Wait until when? Those in the international community who refuse to put red lines before Iran don't have a moral right to place a red light before Israel. I think Iran must understand that there is a red line, so they stop advancing on their program to produce atomic bombs.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday criticizing Washington's refusal to give details about what would provoke a U.S.-led military strike against Iranian nuclear facilities. U.S. wants to give diplomacy and sanctions more time in the hopes that Iran will abandon its nuclear program. The U.S. has said several times this week that deadlines or red lines are counterproductive, but Netanyahu insists that peaceful methods not working and warning that Iran getting closer to producing a nuclear bomb. His remarks have generated speculation that Israel was getting ready to strike on its own. Meanwhile, President Obama's apparent snub of Prime Minister Netanyahu at this critical moment making matters worse. An unnamed Israeli official said the White House had refused Netanyahu's request to meet Obama when the Israeli leader visits the U.S. To attend the UN General Assembly scheduled later this month. White House denied that Netanyahu ever made such an offer, but did confirm the two leaders will not be meeting, given that both will be in different parts of the country. Meanwhile, in Israel, Netanyahu is getting some flack of his own from his own countrymen. That forwarded the tough talk towards President Obama. Opposition leader in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, said, quote, "Mr. Prime Minister, tell me, who is our greatest enemy here, the U.S. or Iran? Who do you want replaced, Ahmadinejad or Obama? How low are you prepared to drag relations with our closest ally?" Well, joining us now to explain this and deal with it, Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, an expert on Middle East politics for the past 20 years. He has been directly involved in various diplomatic negotiations and acts regularly as a liaison between Arab and Israeli officials. Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate a few minutes.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
Well, let me ask you, you've seen the back and forth now. Let's first start with the PR before we get to the policy. Did the president snub Netanyahu as was put out there? A lot of people ascribe motives to Netanyahu that he's got a long-term and long-standing relationship and friendship with Mitt Romney going back more than 20 some odd years, and this wasn't coincidental that it played into the American political calendar. What do you think?
Well, you might say that President Obama might have snubbed Prime Minister Netanyahu, but the truth is also that the State Department and the White House have clearly said that Netanyahu did not request such a meeting with President Obama, and that the issues between them, that is the discrepancy, the differences, have pretty much been ironed out when President Obama did call Netanyahu, and they spoke for nearly an hour on the telephone in order to smooth and reach the different understanding or better understanding between the two sides as to what to do and how to deal with Iran's nuclear program.
What was Netanyahu really aiming for here? Who was his audience, and moreover, what is he hoping that the U.S. government gives him? Because as we saw in the debates, and we'll hear in the upcoming debates, how much of a close ally to Israel has Obama been? You've heard the vocal complaints by AIPAC and others. What's Netanyahu aiming for here?
Well, I think there is no question about it, that the relationships between Israel and the United States has never been closer than it is today. However, that being said, the bilateral relation or the relationship between President Obama and Netanyahu does not necessarily reflect the strong bilateral relation between Israel and the United States. Namely, there is a level of distrust between the two leaders. There's a level of frustration. And there is some differences in their assessment as to how close Iran to producing or reaching the point of no return or what the Israeli also term reaching the zone of immunity. That is, make their facilities, specifically near Qum, the facilities of Fordo, impregnable to air attack. So even though they are sharing more than ever before the intelligence being gathered about Iran nuclear program, and there's tremendous amount of cooperation between the two sides on this score, still when it comes to assessing the intelligence, there are still some legitimate differences, you might say. And from the Israelis' perspective, even a hint of threat that's coming from Iran cannot be taken lightly. And this is where I think the issue has become magnified in terms of how the United States sees this threat. President Obama feels that there's still time for diplomacy and for the sanctions to work. Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying no, diplomacy and sanctions have not worked and not likely to work unless a red line is established so that Iran understands that it can no longer play for time as they have been playing for time for so long, and the interim advance their nuclear program to the level that they have reached today.
Doctor, how much problems internally does Netanyahu have in the Knesset? Because we hear it didn't take long for the opposition to not only take him to task, but also to say that he's inflaming tensions more than they already need to be. Internally, how much of this was a play to the base that Netanyahu made?
Well, you know, there is no love lost between Netanyahu and the leaders of the opposition. There's, you know, the leader of the opposition, Mofaz, who was the chief of staff of the Israeli army, has a different views as to what needs to be done with Iran. And he does not agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu's assessment what can or should be done and when, if anything, to be done. But the truth is that Netanyahu enjoys solid support from his own government, from the coalition government. The Israeli public pretty much trusts Netanyahu and Ehud Barak, the defense minister, to do the right thing. But that does not suggest, however, that the Israeli public in general would like to see Israel attacking Iran directly. A majority of the Israelis strongly suggest that if an attack should take place, it should be initiated by the United States and not by Israel, because no matter what repercussion might be as a result of such an attack, Israel in the end will be singled out and be ostracized by the international community. And this is not something the Israelis would like to see happen.
Definitely
and
not.
Hence they are seeking a more cooperation between the two, Israel and the United States.
Dr. Meir, thank you so much for a few minutes. And I want to bring in our next guest here who joins our table conversation, Tom Basile, former executive director of the New York State Republican Party and current president of Empire Solutions, strategic communications firm. All right. Also, he co-founded the Tea Party Movement 365. Did I get it all?
Yeah, sure.
There you go. All right.
Absolutely.
Listen, let's put this in our own political terms. Whether he was snubbed, he wasn't snubbed, nobody's going to remember that in a week, except, Andrew, for people who don't know, AIPAC's influential here. And if you look more specifically, if we're going to telescope this thing to Florida and maybe Ohio a little bit, where the Jewish vote's going to be important, this will come up, I think, in the debates when we talk foreign policy. How good a friend to Israel is the U.S.? And we already know the Sheldon Adelsons of the world are going to be spending a lot of money on this very subject. Does Obama have exposure here or not?
He does, because this is going to be a huge issue and get all sorts of play on Fox News, because even people who don't follow foreign policy are going to say, well, I know Israel and the United States are supposed to be like this in lockstep. That's what I keep hearing, and there's a snub going on here. But from my standpoint, look, the whole thing with Netanyahu is nonsense. Because Netanyahu, first of all, is in the bag for President Obama. He wants Mitt Romney to win the election. It's better for him politically. It's better for Israel geopolitically. And he's lifelong friends, or has been friends since their 20s with Mitt Romney. what was going to come out of any meeting with Netanyahu? Let's say he scheduled the meeting and Obama did the meeting. You know Netanyahu was going to walk out and be like, we didn't see eye to eye, there's daylight, we couldn't get the president to do it. There was going to be a negative headline coming out of that meeting anyway. So may as well get the negative headline out now as opposed to sitting in a room with him and getting it out then.
What I think they got to be a little careful is nobody wants to start another fight with Iran right now. That's in nobody's interest.
Netanyahu wants to.
He might, but the U.S. public doesn't. And more specifically than that, some neocons might. But Tom, if that's the net here, that they want to either greenlight Israel to go take preemptive action against him, or somehow we're involved, like some of the folks from the last administration wants, they're going to find a not too receptive American public.
Well, I think that we're oversimplifying because the decision would never be that cut and dry, and it's never really that easy. And a lot of the stuff that we really either need to be doing or should be doing with Iran, we really won't be talking about because it'll be a lot of classified stuff. But with respect to the relationship, the bilateral relationship, as the doctor was saying, is strong. Nobody thinks that all of it, we're cutting off ties or we're not cooperating.
You wouldn't know that if you listened to one campaign.
But that's the problem. The problem is this is a pattern of behavior. And it really is between these two guys. It's not necessarily between the two governments. It's between these two guys. And it projects a lack of confidence from the on the administration, from Jews here in the United States, and from people in Israel as well. Obama's numbers in Israel are in the 20s. And that is extraordinary when you have an American president that is distrusted so much by the Israeli public.
But I guess, Andrew, my question is, to my Jewish friend, is this, though, what is the expectation of the U.S. here?
I'm not Jewish.
I forgot.
You're Jewish tonight. You're Jewish tonight.
Shalom, brother.
I'm only
Dominic.
joking.
You go back far enough, we're all Jewish.
I know you're
remember
joking,
that.
Dominic. My point, Andrew, is the substance versus the symbolism. It's been said, in terms of funding, in terms of support, when it's all said and done, the substance says, we've been a good friend to Israel for the last 4 years. And is Netanyahu, what he wants, the same thing as Israel? You've talked about this before.
Well, and keep in mind that the president of Israel, who is not Netanyahu, as well as a lot of the opposition leaders, say relations have never been stronger between the United States and Israel. And there's a lot of evidence to back that up. There are some areas where the two countries don't see eye to eye. And I would just suggest to people, think, instead of Israel, make it any other country in the world. Because the position that we're hearing from the Romney campaign is the U.S. should be in lockstep with Israel. We don't allow other countries to dictate our foreign policy. We don't allow other countries to dictate how we approach, international hotspots. And I don't think we should be allowing it in Israel's case either. We should, as friends, be having discussions and hopefully be, getting each other's backs on most issues.
But when you've got...
I got to take a break here, Tom, but we're going to get into another subject relating to the Middle East and really the last 24, 36 hours. I want to take a look at the limits of free speech. It's one of the rights that we hold most dear in this country, but should things like that anti-Muslim video that sparked this whole uproar in the Middle East yesterday, should there be regulations to it? We talk about hate speech in this country. Our friends around the world here, we're the only westernized nation that doesn't have a limit on hate speech. Is it time we think about doing that here? We'll get into that after this.